Welcome to CNA Money Switzerland's summer series on future trends, and today we're talking about health tech, and I'm joined by Susanne Dröscher. She's the co-CEO of CARU'S. Hi, Susanne.
Hi, Tanya.
So you're at the forefront of age tech with this device, and so CARU'S is full of sensors, and it's a communication tool where you can communicate with, let's say, the elderly that have this at home and can ask for help without using a phone, right?
Exactly.
What was the idea behind it?
Right, so I had a great aunt that fell in her apartment a couple of years ago, and actually she has one of those classic emergency buttons where you could push and then you would be connected with someone. However, she was not wearing it on that day, so she could not push it and she didn't get help easily, only after a couple of hours. And actually 70% of people that have these buttons, they don't wear them. For Thomas and myself, this triggered kind of the thought process of how the emergency system of next generation could look like. Mm-hmm. And we actually developed this idea that a second person in the room or in the apartment would be the very best. And CARU'S is actually the technology way of kind of mirroring or imaging such a second person. It's the digital flatmate.
Okay,
that's what we
when
call
you
it.
say like that, it's almost a bit sad, because at some point people have this and might think, okay, I don't have to visit my mother or grandparents because, you know, if they need something, they will call for it. Is that something that you sometimes think about?
Well, we get people that ask whether this could be the case. However, we see it rather as the opposite, because actually through CARU'S, people that don't use smartphones, so they don't have the communication tools like we have with messengers and so on, with CARU'S, suddenly they can handle these kind of things, because we have, for example, this family chat that you can imagine like a WhatsApp group chat, where the older person participates through CARU'S, and the younger people through their app. So suddenly the family can exchange day-to-day small things, which otherwise they would probably not.
So you mentioned a family chat. How does that work? How can I chat with my family through the device that has no screen?
Right, so that's actually one of the things. It's voice controlled. So we have individual simple keywords, like in the case of the family chat, you need to say, "Hallo Caru," and right away, you get instructions of how to record a message, and this is being then sent into the group chat.
So it's a voice message?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So tech, I mean, can help people's lives, but it can also limit the life of some. Your device, as you mentioned, uses voice. What about deaf people? Have you thought about how including people that maybe...
That's always an issue, because there are people that are impaired on several of the senses. So we always try to give kind of hints on at least 2 channels. So CARU'S interacts on the audio and on the visual level. So it has light and also voice commands that it gives out. And you can trigger it through voice, but also through pushing, for example, on the lid. So that would be a way for the deaf person. So that's what we do, but of course we can also not cover all kind of impairments. There's a limit.
Of course, yeah. But then you somehow still think about how to include as many people as possible.
Definitely, yeah.
And then you mentioned that it has other sensors, so it also checks the temperature, light, so loved ones can check if the conditions are normal, where the environment. So one can interfere as well.
Yeah, and actually we wanted to go even a step further, and this is where CARU'S gets smarter over time also, and we want to put up the upgrades on it in the future. And the idea is really that CARU'S learns what is the normal routine of the person and could also interfere if something is abnormal. And in that case, then inform the relatives. Okay. Because it is always very tricky also to transfer the information to the right person. Because my grandma would not like so much if I know that in her room it's bad air quality, and then I call her and tell her, hey, grandma, please open the window. That's already kind of an intrusion that they don't like, and it also limits their autonomy. So we need to find ways of how to like transmit this information in a very, very like sensible way, and to the right addressee.
And who are the right addresses? You can have several people connected.
Right, so that really depends on the application, we feel. And this is what we test a lot also in user tests, where we have people test the one setting where we would transmit the data to, for example, the family members, and then there's another group that tests it when the information is transferred to the older person, and then we get feedback from them, like how does that feel, and so on. Okay. It's really important to include the users here. That's what we feel.
Exactly. You still want to do good, and that they feel independent and not being watched somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, CARU'S should really be a tool of empowerment for older people to stay in their beloved apartment or house. And that's what we want to support.
It's a fine line.
It's a very fine line.
So with COVID-19, I read that you were even able to release your product earlier than you thought. Because of course we were not supposed to meet the elderly to keep that distance. So how has COVID-19 accelerated all that?
So on the one hand, it has stopped our business pretty much from one day to the next, because suddenly we could not visit our original customer group, which were nursing homes, assisted living, and so on. And then on the other hand, we got a lot of inquiries from private households whether they could use it in order to stay in touch. And this is what then triggered our decision to really speed up the B2C launch. And we did that within a couple of weeks instead of in a couple of months. We had originally planned to launch in October this year. But now with this special situation, we just thought, we should bring this to market and make it available.
And you were ready?
We had to, of course, work hard. So there were several night shifts also in this whole thing. But now it's there, and we get a lot of great feedback from people.
What do they say? What's the response?
So it's really about this new way of interacting. And it's interesting because the family chat that I mentioned before, it's actually also a thing that helps to increase this feeling of safety for both sides, for the family and also the older person.
And how about, I mean, you can send voice messages, but how do you receive a message in that family chat?
So the family would record a voice message in the app and then send it to the group, and it would also arrive here.
Okay. And in COVID-19 in general, with this pandemic, did you as a company learn something for the future that you want to do differently? Maybe not about the device, but really about your company now.
Yeah, so I think what was extremely exciting was to see that in the end, all of us, we kind of experienced a little bit how it is to be isolated. And we also found our ways of how to continuing life in a more or less pleasant way, and we started to order a lot of things home. And I think this is really something that we will have even more in the future, and also something that we at CARU want to support the older people again, to also be able to order goods and services home, help them to maybe also participate in telemedicine and things like that.
So you're thinking about expanding your product?
Definitely, we're thinking about how can older people, for example, order services to their home, because there is a big trend of people aging in place instead of moving to a nursing home. And we believe strongly that the more people get immobile at some point, the more services need to also come to their home in order to ensure them having a good life still. And we see a lot of ways how we could also help them there, and how CARU could be a hub of not only communicating with family, friends and caregivers, but also maybe with service providers outside.
So that is one thing that you see in the future. If you look at age tech in general, is there anything else that you think there's a need for?
So definitely coordination of all the ambulant care, because there will be more need for that. And we already now have a lack of staff and of care providers out there. So I think in this area, there's a lot of things that need to be improved to make, well, to empower in the end also the caregivers to use their time as efficiently and positively as possible. And I think what also needs to be put much more effort into is to use technology really as support, such that caregivers have time for the human interaction, and all the other things like administration and so on. This can be perfectly simplified by technology. And I believe we're really at the beginning of what is possible there.
So you just talked about what you would like to see in the future. How are you as CARU stepping in or stepping up actually in that area in the future?
So we are involved in several projects. One of them is specifically looking into this, where we are seeing in a European project with a lot of end-user parties, but also development and research partners, how we can actually simplify the communication between caregiver and the older person. So CARU would then, for example, give out the arrival time of the caregiver, which it gets from GPS data from the caregivers. And by that really already inform the older person that soon it's time for caregiving, which is one of these things. It's small things in daily life, but it gives a lot of insecurity for older people. And we would like to give this upfront information that someone is coming soon. And these are the small things that I think will make a difference, and they will also be needed in the future.
Great. Well, then I wish you all the best. Continue your project, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Tanya.